Hi, everybody. As people join, we're going to just wait a couple minutes to get started, but welcome, welcome.
Maybe it's always fun as people come in, if you want to share where you are calling in from. It's fun for our guests to see where everyone is. So go ahead and put that in the chat.
I'm looking.
One, Chicago, should be from all over.
Palo Alto.
Especially because everyone's remote, huh?
Pittsburgh, yes. Oxford, Canada.
Oxford late.
Dallas, Georgia. Few Austin, Texas.
Lebanon, oh wow.
Hartwell, Georgia. Oh my. We got some states that are still voting. Let's see here. Oh, Lebanon, yeah. Quite a group here, girls.
Wow. Thank you all for joining. We're super excited to have you on today.
Yep, and it looks like the attendees have slowed, so I will go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Stanford Women in Business's Fall Executive Leadership Series. Stanford Women in Business is the largest pre-professional organization for undergraduate women on Stanford's campus, and we are committed to providing education, community, and networking for rising female business leaders. Through workshops, conferences, company treks, and speaker series like this one, we strive to cultivate opportunities for mentorship, career guidance, and industry exposure. For today's fireside chat, we are so grateful to be joined by the incredible Ginni Rometty. SWIB's wonderful co-president Brooke Martin will be moderating our discussion today. But before I hand it over to her, I want to encourage you to submit questions throughout the event using the Q&A function. We will have some time at the end to answer them. We will also be posting a recording of today's event on the Stanford Women in Business website, so be sure to follow up there as you wish. So with that, I want to thank you all for joining us, with special thanks, of course, Ms. Ginni Rometty, her team, my co-vice president, Kevin McComb, and SWIB for participating in and putting on this event today. I will now pass it over to Brooke.
Thank you so much, Alex. Hi, all, and thank you so much for joining us for SWIB's Executive Leadership Series event. We are honored to learn from our distinguished guest today, and it is my distinct pleasure and privilege to introduce Ms. Ginni Rometty. Ginni Rometty is the current executive chairman and former CEO of IBM. Throughout her tenure as CEO, Ginni made numerous bold changes that repositioned IBM for the future through investments in high-value segments of the IT market and optimization of the company's portfolio. Ginni also established IBM as the model of responsible stewardship in the digital age, which she will be discussing with us today. Through her work, Ginni became the industry's leading voice on technology ethics and data stewardship. In addition to her roles at IBM, Ginni serves on the Council on Foreign Relations as Vice Chair of the Board of Trustees for Northwestern University and the boards of overseers and managers of Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. She is also co-chair of the Aspen Institute Cyber Group, a member of the advisory board of Tsinghua University School of Economics and Management, and a member of the Singapore Economic Development Board International Advisory Council. So clearly she has so much experience and insight to share with us today. Welcome, Ginni.
Thank you, Brooke. Thank you, Alex.
All right, so to begin, you've clearly had an incredible career that has taken you through many different roles. And so looking back, can you walk us through your journey to becoming a leading tech executive, and what are some of the key inflection points that shaped your professional journey?
Oh boy, what a trip down memory lane is how you want to start, huh? So, well, like many of you, you've got women that are in business or across any of the schools, I should just guess right now, in Stanford.
Yes.
Just business school or all disciplines?
All disciplines. All disciplines,
okay.
Yes.
So I started with a degree in electrical engineering and computer science. So I started down that path, and actually for a little while, I actually worked at General Motors when I first got out of school, and then went from General Motors on to IBM. And then at IBM, I had the chance to do lots of different things. So everything from engineering to product development to sales to marketing to finance, all different roles. And then eventually ended up doing some pretty big things. So helping build our services business and acquiring PricewaterhouseCoopers, and then running all of sales, and then eventually running all of IBM. So a lot of different jobs. This is my 40th, it will be my 40th year. So 40, I know girls, you're not that old, okay? So this probably qualifies me to be all of your mothers, but this is my 40th year, but I had 10 different careers all wrapped up in one year. And so clearly some of the biggest milestones along the way, which we'll come back to talking about this, had to do with when I took on some of the riskiest jobs along the way.
Right. Well, and I'm guessing that CEO was one of the riskier jobs that you had. And so during your tenure as CEO, you led a sweeping transformation of IBM. Can you share the nature of that transformation and the conditions that necessitated it?
Well, okay. So look, this has been what I say hindsight's 2020, no pun intended, or I say to people it's revisionist history, because this year I've been executive chairman, so I've had a chance to look back a little ways. I've led IBM. This will be 9 years, and it's clearly been the largest reinvention of the company, and it has been the one that has been probably the one that shook it to its core the most and had to change. So when I took over, it was 2012. And my job really then was refocus the company on cloud and on data. And at the same time, in many ways, invest to rebuild an innovation engine so that there was truly a technology roadmap for its future. And that led down, I always kind of think of three, well, you'll find in 1 hour, you'll hear three things from me all the time, three. Somewhere along my line, whether this was the divinity, that's three of everything is a way to remember something. And there have been three big clusters of change in IBM. So one was its portfolio, what it did. One was how people did their work. And then the third was their skills. So I got the chance on the portfolio just to kind of step back and give a quick picture. When I said refocus the company to cloud and to data, one of the things you have to always think about is what should endure and what should change in a company. So for IBM, one of the great lessons about what should endure, at our heart, we're a mission critical company. So whether it was the census system, whether it was landing the man on the moon, whether it was airplanes flying, bake transitions moving, that's what we do. Sometimes I think of it's always what's below the surface, and keeping it focused on mission critical, but in a new architecture. And so that led to $10 billion of divestitures. That led to 65 acquisitions. The biggest one was Red Hat. That led to, actually most recently, we're spinning off a small piece of the company so that we stay focused on the hybrid cloud. So it's mission critical work, hybrid cloud and AI, but for mission critical work. So today, 50% of IBM's 80 billion is brand new revenue, 50. So it's a lot. And, but I always say the other two big things, you say, what did you do? Changing the way people work. And we can talk a little bit about that. Because I always say, everyone always wanted to write about the portfolio. But to me as a leader, the more interesting work was changing how people did their work and getting them to change their skills. And I said, that's the thing nobody ever wants to write about, doesn't want to talk about. But to me, it's what I will always remember the most about. And the how they work had to do with, because this is a world, you guys are, well, you're not all on the West Coast right now, but if you were in school, you'd be on the West Coast. And it's a world of speed and consumerism. So if you're an enterprise company, that, either that's out of favor or you're not front pane of glass for what everyone sees. But you had to instill that same way of working in a enterprise company. So that I would say one of my stories was, for my first couple of years, I would say to people, come on, we got to go faster. You have to go faster. This has to be simple. You have to go faster. And I said after about 2 years, I succeeded in thoroughly exhausting everyone. And I would get up and every speech I'd be like, yeah, she's going to tell us to go faster. And I sort of had an epiphany that at some point, a company of our size, 350,000 people, they can't go faster unless leadership did something to change how work was done. That led to a big creation of design thinking labs. We hired 20,000 designers at the end of the day. It led to agile on steroids, which if any of you do agile, if you really do it right, is very hard work. It led to things like net promoter score. It led to just a whole slew of changes of how work got done. Co-location, $1 billion of real estate. I mean, all sorts of stuff that we changed. But that actually let people change how they did their work. And they were, it's the kind of thing, unless I change it, to change work, you have to change the work. And so that was one. And then the last piece was about their skills, which we should talk a little bit about, because that was another one where, given speed of transformation the pressure being so intense about speed, we hired many, many, many new people. So 95% of my direct team was new in position. A third was from outside the company. 20% of all leadership was outside the company. But at the end of the day, the only thing that really mattered on people. Didn't matter if they were internal or external, it was their willingness to learn. So it was a sharp lesson in that somebody's ability to learn meant a whole lot more than what they actually knew. So it's something, when people ask me today, what do I hire for? I tell them I hire for someone's ability to learn. In fact, it changed IBM's hiring. We see 8,000 applicants a day. It changed it to be all about propensity to learn instead of what they actually knew. Odds are, if you only do one thing and you've done it for 20 years, you probably don't want to change. And if you're in tech, the half-life of a skill is 5 years. So great learning.
Wow, that's so interesting. And I think when we talk about the modernization of a legacy technology company like IBM, we think about the technology modernizing, but the way that people do work is fascinating. And before we get into that, I would love to ask you a little bit more of this transformation. And even in the midst of some difficult market conditions for IBM, you insisted that IBM model what responsible stewardship looks like in the digital age. And I would love to know why this is so important to you.
Well, I'd sort of like to also have your all reaction to this, okay? Brooke and Alex, you're on the screen with me. So my view on this started back, it had to be the very beginning of my tenure, 2012, 2013. And obviously there was this big new technology platforms brewing. IBM would have to build a new platform, the hybrid cloud. Companies are at their best when they build a platform. We'll come back to that. But I remember distinctly saying to my workforce and my team, saying, I can sense that there is this war brewing between good tech and bad tech. So it is this belief, my view, we're 109 years old, at least what I've been taught. I've been here not almost half of its time, that if you're going to build technology, you got to bring it in the world safely. And that is your obligation to the world. Prepare society for it. A, society has to trust it. B, they have to be prepared to think they can have a good life living with this technology. And then C, it should be built by a diverse and inclusive workforce and used by them. So I said to the team, look, keep going back to those three things. This is why I think a company like IBM is so trusted by so many clients. All these decades, it is that word trust. And I would define what it meant. And it meant just what I said to you guys. Trust the technology, prepare society to use it, build it with a diverse and inclusive team. And so I felt that was what it meant to be good tech. And so that led to things like, when I think of good tech, when it comes to trusting the technology, one, we said, look, all this technology we're building has to make man better, not just replace him. If data, and I guess this can be controversial, I feel strongly data belongs to its owner, its creator. I can't use it without your permission. I can't benefit from it without your permission. Then, and if I build something, it has to be built free of bias and transparent, explainable, so you could trust it. So in other words, like we built all this technology for AI, we will show you how the model works so that you could trust what it is doing. Or the teams have built quantum. So quantum technologies are wonderful. In the future, they'll solve some great problems. Quantum has an underbelly. Quantum can break encryption codes. So we put as much effort into working on how to build cryptography that could not be broken by quantum as we put into building the quantum. To me, that's good tech. You have to look at both sides of everything. So that to me became, I hope, one of it'll get on to what we did in education skills and all these things, but I hope it's one of the greatest legacies I leave, that the team views the value and the importance of always being a role model for good tech. So let me ask you now, Brooke and Alex, so instead being in a trance listening to these crazy Zooms, what would you have said is your definition of good tech? If I said, what is good tech or bad tech? What would you say? Brooke, you first.
That's a great question. I think I would say good technology is principled. And by that, I think I mean that when the technologists are inventing, when entrepreneurs are starting companies or technologies, that they go about their values and their principles in a very deliberate manner, and that they're very aware and conscious of the impact that they're having on society.
Yeah, okay, that's a good definition. How about you, Alex?
I would echo that. I think, the ethics and I guess too, in SWIB, we talk a number of times about social entrepreneurship, and I think that's kind of a buzzword right now. But also at Stanford more broadly, we see more and more the question of ethics in technology and how, as students, but also as future innovators, how we can incorporate that. So I just love the concept of responsible stewardship, though, because it applies to any industry and any organization. So I love the model. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, well, it is it's not an afterthought, right? So it is something that you have to viscer, because you use the word values and principles. That's what I think. It's got to be based on what you really believe. And if it's based on what you really believe, these are not actually hard decisions then, because you're authentic about what they are. So I once had a senator call me and ask me about, he said, hey, look, if your cloud had child sex trafficking on it, would you be willing to be liable? Now, that was a very easy question. Now, others did not say yes to that. I said yes. I said, yeah, this is not a hard question. I mean, I don't do any money laundering either. And I would turn it in knowingly, obviously, if I knew it, I'd be liable for something like that. And so this to me has been at the root of what some of the conflict is out in the world right now about some technology companies who don't, or they state those values, but then don't live up to them, or don't internalize what those mean. Because usually if it's something about your values and principles, you'll find it's pretty easy to answer, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think turning back to the values and principles, and you've spoken to diversity and inclusion. And when you look back at IBM's track record and value of D&I, what has the company done right and where can it improve?
Okay, so you must ask everyone, do you ask this question of everybody, right? When
Yes,
they
yes.
come on, and so I'm going to give you my answer, and then I'm really anxious to hear what you hear from others, right? Because this is another one of those that to me falls in the authenticity meter about how people answer. So I heard a great quote: diversity is a fact, but inclusion is a decision. And I think it's extremely good. And people will say, well, how do you go about this? And to me, I say, hey, look, it's a million things that you do consistently and keep raising the bar on yourself. But there's no silver bullet on this topic. Now, I was brought up, and I always say, like, I stand on the shoulders of lots of great decisions that were made in IBM. And my last year, I'm proud to say we have record diversity and inclusion numbers. So we took them to new records. I'm really proud of that. But I have to tell you, I mean, my first 4 managers when I joined IBM were women. First 4, wow. So up the ranks were women. I didn't think much about it at the time, right? And to me, it's both a business and a social imperative to do this. I'm not doing it for just altruistic reasons. Back to that set of principles, you get better outcomes, you get better creativity, innovation. You want people to feel comfortable, bring themselves to work. All of those kinds of things. And in my real belief that economic opportunity is the great equalizer of all people, right? So when you say, what have we done right? So the first Black and woman were hired in 1899. We had equal pay in 1935. It was 1953 equal opportunity policy before it had ever even been dreamed about, here in any kind of legislation. Our board has had women on it for many decades. So that is kind of what you did yesterday is just your foundation for tomorrow. Because now what could we have done better? So here I told you I had record diversity and inclusivity. I was working on equality. And then all of these incidents around racial injustice happened. And I think if we were so good, how did this happen? And what I learned in that process this year is that there's so much we could have done better. And even though I'm really proud of what we have done, and for a tech company, even there, that's already kind of a bit of an excuse. For a tech company, we have a great percentage of our diverse populations, but could always do better. And just out of kind of pure coincidence, it was January, before I announced that I was going to be retiring. I have the whole leadership team together, and every year I pick one of our diverse groups and we spend an evening with them telling and sharing their experience. So I had to plan that meeting, had to be back in October, and I said, let's do the Black experience at IBM this year. And I said, but first let's go to a lot of my Black leaders and be sure I'm helping. I'm not hurting something. I'm trying to help. And they said yes, but I learned so much in an evening. There were 300 senior leaders, and these are very senior, accomplished Black leaders in the company who, in their own heart, stood up and talked about what did it feel like to be a Black leader. Now, I don't believe I'm not a one-off here. In the stories that I heard about the pressure that they feel, as an example, they say, if you fail in a job, you feel bad. If I fail in a job, I feel I've set back a whole community of people when I fail in a job, or a country. One of them from Nigeria said this, and talked about what access meant and what the rest of us may have thought access meant. And of course, some gut-wrenching stories. And this is way before any of this is at all ever happened. It really kind of come, and it just reminded me of how systemic these things are in a firm where here I'm so proud of all these other things. It just showed me how much further we had to go. And when you say what you could do better, these battles of diversity and inclusion, particularly inclusion, they are a battle of your head and your heart. They are both. And that idea about how you listen, and you listen for intent, so our Black population is at 8%. Well, the United States is at 14. Why aren't my senior Black employees at 14 at a minimum? So that is an example of what I feel we should do better. And so we're working very hard on lots of different things in that area. But it's kind of what I'd leave you with is this part about inclusion's a decision. You got to believe in your heart that is value for business, that it is not just a societal imperative. Like, these are not CSR initiatives, and it is also a business initiative at the same time. And when you really believe that, you'll make the right decisions, and you'll stay at it, and you'll stay at it, and you'll stay at it. And it's the summation of a million things you keep doing over time.
Wow, no, that's
What have
amazing.
others told you when you ask that question? What do they say about it?
I think we hear a diverse set of responses, but I'm very honored and just proud of the work that you're doing. I think comes back to what you mentioned of living your values and really starting there, and not just thinking about these things kind of after the fact. So building it in is really, really crucial. And you mentioned access, and I want to dial in on that and the importance of access and inclusivity. And I think another important part of access is education. And I know that you've been a tireless advocate of alternative models of education. In particular, you focused on skills acquisition, which we've discussed a bit, both as a way to develop the next generation workforce, but also as a way to foster more diversity in the workplace. So I'm curious, can you tell us your views on the future of work and how access fits into this?
You guys are, obviously so privileged. You're getting a wonderful education, all of you at a school like this. And I went to Northwestern. I'm very proud of what I did. Although I came from a very underprivileged background to do that, which maybe we'll talk a little bit about, but a little bit of history of my view on when you said alternate education models, because it isn't that I don't believe that a college education is the right thing. This actually goes back in time. About 10 years ago, I looked, and for our workforce, again, we're big, right? 400,000 people. There was 10% unemployment in the country, yet we couldn't fill tech jobs. And we're like, well, how? There's 10% unemployment, but nobody's got the skill to fill these jobs. So we started to come up with new models for that reason. But then time went on just a little bit more. And to your comment, Brooke, about I do believe AI will eventually change 100% of all jobs. And I kept saying, people, I did not say replace. I said change. In some way, you're gonna live with this technology. And I've watched people struggle. The more professional the job, by the way, the harder. And so then I started to say, this is going to be a problem. Then you saw more and more social unrest. And in my view, this digital divide growing, in that I think we still have this issue. The digital era could turn out to be the most diverse era, not an inclusive era. So your West Coast, East Coast of the United States, super. Middle, technology's left you behind. Go to every country in the world, and I find this discussion about how many people feel their futures no better because of what has happened with technology. I always say, those are like seeds of revolutions. Those are very bad positions for countries to be in. And this really got me moving on this concept that, wait, we don't have time. I can't ask for the whole world to get a college degree. And by the way, even when they get them, sometimes they're not employable even. And so, or can't afford it, or they're mid-career. So what could we do? And it was to start a movement. And I think I'm going to take credit for hopefully starting this movement now around skills first, meaning, hey, if I got the skill somewhere, please hire me for that, even if I don't have the degree yet. And then give me some new pathways to enter. So we started with things like 6-year high schools. We went to a high school with a community college in the most underserved communities. And we said, look, we'll give you mentors, internships, a chance at a job. Just kind of teach these soft skills. We'll teach them the rest. Lo and behold, now this is 10 years later, there's a pipeline of about 150,000 kids. We're now in 25 countries, almost 300 schools, 600 other companies helping, and it's scaling. And it's one example. There are others, apprenticeships, et cetera. But it's the only way to break a cycle. It's the only way to break a cycle, which is the point about economic opportunity. So we coined it something. So there would be, because at first people's reaction were, you're dumbing down the workforce. My workforce was all PhDs, all university graduates. I'm not dumbing it down. they're just got a different starting point than you did. Because by the way, already 75% have gone on to get their 4-year degrees. And I have my first PhD out of this crowd.
Yeah.
And they just didn't have the access. And their zip code should not be their destiny. And I learned that. I mean, my mother was on food stamps. I mean, there's nothing in the world that says the odds are I should have ended up where I ended up. But it was because of a determined mother, the social systems that are there that gave access to these things. And so that is why, a little bit, sorry, long answer, we coined it called new collar. So not blue collar, not white collar. And I'm on a movement now, getting all the companies in the world to change their hiring requirements for entry jobs, that you can enter into the middle class by getting these skills and credentials, however it happened to be, and then you could move on from there. And that was skills first. We called it new collar, not blue, not white, something good. And in fact, now in IBM, 40% of the job postings in the United States are and do not require a college degree to get started. So, and 15% of the hiring in the last 2 years, so we hired the barista out of the location we hired. And again, these are people with quite a lot of aptitude. It's life circumstances have brought them to a different spot. And they're some of the smartest, best employees that we have. So anyways, I'm on a movement on this everywhere on this topic now. So
That's so wonderful. Well, new caller, you heard it here first, everyone. That's so amazing. And you mentioned that one part of this new caller initiative is mentorship. And so I'm curious, can you discuss the role of mentorship throughout your career, and how has this shaped your journey, and what advice would you give to the aspiring young women leaders?
Yeah, you guys this is another one I'm anxious to hear what other people say to you. I have perhaps a slightly different view of mentorship than other people. My view on mentorship is I want to learn from everybody I can learn from. So there've never been times when I said, oh, so-and-so is my mentor. I mean, maybe in retrospect, there were people I felt took a greater interest in me. So I say, oh, he's one of my many mentors, But I actually think when people are looking for sponsorship from one person, that's not a good model. In that the real way is, if every interaction you think about, what can I learn? You will enlist them to support you by that. By how if you're open and want to learn, you will enlist them. And so that's my view of mentorship. Now, all that said, Brooke, I will tell you, for many years, I was sort of painfully aware that, look, don't ever think of me as a woman in business. I always said, I want to be known for what I accomplish. And I would go to great lengths, not to be recognized for that. And I can remember sort of 2 episodes separated by decades. One was probably 2.5 decades ago. And I was down in Australia presenting, and I had thought I'd done this fine job at a presentation. And this man came up to me afterwards, and I thought he's going to comment about how, some question about how interesting my presentation was. And instead he said to me, I wish my daughter could have been here to see you. And it was one of those epiphany moments. And I thought to myself, maybe I'm doing a disservice by never speaking about this topic. Well, time would go on. And as I took this role, I then began to really understand that how women felt that you can't be what you cannot see, and that there was merit to talking about what it was and to be a role model. And I think you guys, you need to think about that. You're a role model, whether it's for work friends, younger children, people around you. It's actually something I wish I'd internalized earlier, that importance of there being role models. They're probably just as important as mentors. That there are role models around you that you can see and say, well, I can learn from that, or I can do work that way. Or, I always feel like some of my, one of my good friends, Condi Rice, Stanford, you all know Condi very well, right? And I always say to her, there's an old saying, you never want to meet your heroes. And I always say, when I've introduced Condi at events, that I say, oh no, she's one you do want to meet. And I think she's so graceful in the most difficult of situations, right? So that would be something I learned, or at least would try to emulate from what she does. And therefore, I think this idea of having role models so that you can do your job your way is a really important thing.
Wow. Yeah, I think I love that distinction between role models and mentors. And I'm curious, this balance between being a female leader in technology, recognizing that, can you discuss some of the challenges you've faced as a female leader and how you've dealt with that, whether that's acknowledging it, not?
Well, I would say, okay, so first nodding on, but there's no doubt the more you go on, because there aren't many, I would say the advice I give to other new young women CEOs, I'll say is, well, get ready because everything you do is personified and everything you do is magnified. And it doesn't matter whether I'd read an article about acquisitions, they'd say I was on a shopping spree. I said, really? A shopping spree? Would you use that word, ma'am? Seriously. And so, or comments of my clothing or comments of, and so you're gonna say, well, he was in a black suit. I mean, you don't hear that. I mean, it just
Yeah.
doesn't, no one even talks about it. So, and I said, so you just have to tune it out, right? And tune it out, and over time, hopefully that changes. So I think that is the one thing that, and again, easier for me to talk about now as I look back, is that idea that it'll be personalized because there aren't many of us. And so I want there to be more of us. So in other words, when they talk about the company, they'll use my name, not the company name, right? And you'll read, and this has actually been published research. You'll read others and it'll be the name of the company, not the person. And so now that can have its good sides at times as well. So, but that is one thing that you just have to be prepared and just move through it, in my view.
That's great advice. And I think before we move on to the next question, I do want to encourage participants to put any questions in our question box.
Yeah, am
We
I
will
tiring them out? Am
I don't
I
think so.
exhausting them?
Everyone seems very engaged. And yeah, we would love to hear from you in a little bit. So feel free to pop those in there and we'll call on your questions as we have time. And so looking now to the future, which we've touched on, but particularly given the unprecedented and challenging circumstances of this year in COVID-19, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the role of technology in the continual evolution of our daily lives. And in particular, like we've seen so much disruption in the ways that we live, work, and operate. So how do you envision the technology industry evolving over the next few years?
Yeah. Well, I hope what it has shown us over the next few years is that it becomes more human. Because during this moment, look, all of you should be on campus and you should be in school, right? And here you're all doing remote learning, all positive sides to it, right? I say during this COVID moment, we married my sister on Zoom. I was the IT department, and the highest paid IT department out there, I'm sure. But now, what was the good and the bad, right? They wanted a really small wedding. It was only going to be my mother. My mother was too old to travel, so she couldn't, in COVID, could not obviously travel for all of the health reasons. So my husband was the minister. He did it. I did the IT. I convinced them. I said, hey, look, I know you want a small wedding. Mom can watch, okay? And then, of course, I wasn't too many steps away from convincing them to let 50 other family members watch. Now, so what did I learn? And so one way, it was a wonderful personal event because of it and the way we did it and the personalized interaction. And to me, it's a bit of what's ahead of us now. Not that you'll do every wedding on Zoom, but it can be done in a personal way. And as I look at how our workforce, I don't believe this is going to be 100%, remote work. That is not a good thing because right now we're drawing on all the social capital. See, it's one thing you've worked someplace, you have a network, you know people, but many of our jobs are quote apprenticeship jobs. You learn from others around you and watching. And so, yes, you can learn on Zoom or WebEx or whatever you are, but the other way is being around people and some of the innovation that happens. So I think we're going to go to this new kind of hybrid model. Now, we've already gotten rid of lots of real estate. We're reformatting real estate. Certain teams will come in at certain times, different cadences. Some may work home half the time, other half in, much greater flexibility. So on one hand, I think the technology will allow and become more human, and I don't mean by impersonating a human, I mean allowing us to be more human and do what it is that we do best is what I hope does come out of this. And it will be a new hybrid way of working and of living. Because I think if you look at all the downsides, you can name them. But the positives, when I talk to all my friends, I did a little Zoom cocktail party with all my colleagues and had about 30 of them. And I asked everyone to pick one word that would describe their feelings of this moment. And of course, people had, their companies that had no customers and all sorts of things. But on the positive, everyone said on the positive a word that was either about family, about togetherness, about gratitude, because there has been a positive side of the time you have spent with people you loved or cared for or whatever it was during this same moment. So I think we'll have learned an interesting lesson out of this period of time of what really matters. And then, so what should technology do and what shouldn't it do? Now, for companies like IBM, it's an opportunity because a lot of people will have to modernize their systems. And that's what a hybrid cloud and AI are all about. And that's what we do for mission critical work. Not that I'm here to advertise. I'm meant for advertising for hiring, of course. But it will be used for those kinds of things. And that's really serious, important stuff.
Absolutely. And it's not just the technologies, but the way that people are working too, right?
Yep.
It's so fascinating. Well, great. I think one last question, and we'll move into a couple rapid fire questions. But if you have, as you look back at your career, are there any lessons that you haven't shared already that you'd like to share with the aspiring leaders with us today?
Yeah, well, I have to give you my three, again, hindsight's 2020, my three favorite lessons. I give them different names. I call them Mark, Mom, and me. And Mark is my husband. And that's actually who you heard banging around in the background. He was pouring his glass of wine. He chooses to do this exactly when I'm on Zoom. And so my advice is first my mom, though. I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier. When I was young, my father left my mother with 4 kids, no job, no money. And my mom did not have an education. And we were on financial aid and food stamps and things like that. And my mom was like, this isn't how it's going to end. I was old enough to help her, and she went back to school at night, got an associate's degree, was able to get a good job. And as I say, the rest of my sisters and brother have done better than I. So ironically, out of these ashes, the 4 of us, and I always say, what did I learn? So for all of you, it's what I learned from my mom. And it was never let anyone define yourself, only you define who you are. So my mother was not going to let my father define her as, a divorcee, homeless, any of those kind of words. You take it in your own hands and you determine what you are. And I can't tell you how true that is to this day. If you're a person, if you're a country, if you're a company, if you don't define who you are, someone else will define you. And so always take that in your hands. So that's when I give my mom as a lesson. The second one, I saw someone in the chat say, what would you have given your younger self? And the second one I did learn from my husband, which I have shared a couple times, but it was probably 10 years in or so. And I had been offered a very big job at IBM. And I didn't think I was ready. I thought I needed a couple more years to be ready for it. And the person who had offered, I was going to take his job, he said, hey, they're going to offer you the job, go to the interview. I said, I need a few more years. He said, go to the interview. I went to the interview and I get offered the job. And I said, can I go home and I would like to go talk to my husband about it. It's okay. So I went home, talked to my husband, I'm blah, blah, blah. And he says, hey, I told him I wanted to talk to you. He goes, do you think a man would have answered it that way? I said, probably not. Because I said, I'm not ready. I need some time. He says, you'll be bored in 6 months. Yes, I've heard this already. And he said, but you can't say that. And I went back in, I took the job, and the person hiring me looked at me and said, don't ever do that again. I said, I understand. And in that moment is probably the greatest lesson I've had in my life, which is that growth and comfort will never coexist. And that if you are ever going to grow and do something, you will always feel ill at ease. Now I've embraced it now. I'm like, the more nervous I get, I'm like, oh, great. Because I'm coming out at the other end, something better. It doesn't matter. I don't care what it is. Whatever bad happens, I look at the other side of it, of what I learned out of that. And so, or as nervous as I might get. In fact, actually, if I don't get nervous, it's time to change jobs. Well, not like I had plenty of challenges, don't worry. But that point, and I do give he's not listening, so I give my husband credit for that, okay? And
Great lesson.
And then my last one is, we'll go to your lightning round, but it has to do with, and at some point this will be right for all of you, but it has to do with purpose. I told you I worked for General Motors. Mary Barra went to Stanford. She's a good friend. And I owed them a lot. They helped pay my tuition at Northwestern. And no strings attached. It was a program they had. Great companies do great things. And I went to work there. But as I say, I wasn't passionate about cars. I was doing buses and trucks specifically, and getting called in the middle of the night working on this. And I'm like, oh, this is not me. And I learned at a really young age that, being passionate about what you did actually did matter. now I fast forward to today, and probably if you went back and listened to everything I said, someone said to me, well, when your eyes light up the most, it's when you're talking about education and skills and all of these things. And, it's probably what I'll do in my own chapter too. I have been working with a man named Ken Frazier, who runs Merck the Drug Company. Ken Chenault ran American Express. And we've been working on a coalition to place 1 million Black employees for the first time into the middle class, into our companies. So, I mean, that to me is, so you'll find your purpose. And all this work I did on education all these years to prepare people to love technology, because if they didn't love technology, society's going to hate us. Yeah. And society is what gives you a license to operate. You may think you give yourself a license, but you don't. It is society. If you are there for the long, and we're 109 years old, and I am completely convinced the reason IBM still exists is because society allows it to exist. And so that idea is, for you, I said, I'll give myself that lesson. My lesson to you is, at some point, sort of double click and be sure you're working on something that you're passionate about, that has got some purpose. It will be different levels at different times in your life, but there is some purpose to it.
Wow, what incredible advice. I was writing down some of that while you were chatting. I want to put it up on my wall. Thank you so much for your incredible insights. And we'll go into a few quick rapid questions, and then we'll transition to audience Q&A. So my first question is your favorite book.
Oh. I actually don't really have a favorite. I have to tell you the truth about that. I am a fast reader of like a lot, like I'm looking at the one on my desk right now is, hang on, this is not even a new one. I am reading The Tyranny of Merit. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So there you go. All right. So I don't have
Awesome.
a very, very eclectic taste on that.
That's great. What's your favorite way to relax?
Oh, just to be with my friends or my family, because I get to do so little of that.
Yep, absolutely. Or do you have any new quarantine hobbies or habits?
Oh, well, I'm a Zoom wedding planner.
That's amazing.
That is, and then I went on to do a cocktail party, and I did a graduation. So I am going to be an events planner in another life.
That's amazing. That's a great hobby to have.
Yep.
What's your morning routine?
Well, now this is a good one. I now in Zoom land, or in COVID land, my morning is I get up very early and I walk an hour. But it is an interesting point. A lot of people say that to me about, well, they'll use the word work-life balance and things like that. And I'm always fighting with my weight about trying to, always keep it down. It wants to go up. I keep it down, up, down, up, down. And so I've said to people, and I really mean this, and I think it's true in most places, that only you give your work-life balance. And I said, any company is a thing. It'll take everything you have to give it if you allow it. So you have to set your boundaries. So I set my boundary. I give myself that hour. I was boxing though. I did a lot of boxing pre-COVID. Cool. Yeah, I know I could get that mirror thing and do my boxing. He wants me to get that mirror thing, but I'm doing fine with my walking right now. So
a peaceful way to start the day. That's wonderful.
I walk very fast, so it's not so peaceful. And I do phone calls and I do the news all at once. One of these days I'm going to fall. I do have to watch that part. Yeah.
Oh no. Yeah. Be careful. Yes. Well, and we touched on this earlier, but who are your role models?
Well, like I said, one of mine is Condi. My mother's obviously one of them. I think another great role model, you wouldn't even know her. She's the president of Rensselaer Polytechnique. Now, she was on my board, Dr. Shirley Jackson. She was the first woman Black PhD out of MIT. Wow. And she is a force of nature. So that's a little bit of a commonality. A lot of my role models are women, and they are forces of nature.
Love that. We talked about advice very recently, but the best advice you've ever received, what would you say? You had to pick one.
It's probably, believe it or not, probably people say you need to be more, don't be so critical of yourself, right? And I do think it's back to that thing about women are actually quite critical of themselves. So this is women in business here. I think that idea, just like that story I told about my husband, I could count everything I couldn't do and didn't focus on a thing I could do when he offered me that job. I told him everything I couldn't do yet. Instead of, the flip is my husband said, well, hey, I would have told him the 10 things I could do. I would have left out the 2 I can't, And that idea about the best advice I got is focus on the positives, right? Don't always focus on what you can't do. It's funny, I do it for other people. I don't do it for myself.
Yep. It's funny how that happens sometimes.
Yep.
And what is the best advice you think you've given?
Oh, it's
Given us a
definitely.
lot of good.
Oh yeah, I'm giving you too much, okay? But it's growth and comfort do not coexist. It doesn't matter what language.
Yeah.
I hear that back from my IBM people everywhere in the world, right? I'll be on with China shortly after I'm with you guys. I guarantee you they're going to tell me that too, and as I talk to them.
That's so great. What a great way to look at kind of discomfort and see the positive there. Well, amazing. Again, thank you so much, Ginny, for your advice and insights. I'm sure everyone would be applauding if we were in person. It has been so incredibly informative and inspiring to talk with you. And I'm going to pass it to Alex, who will moderate our audience Q&A.
Okay, wake them up, Alex. Ring a bell.
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you so much, Ginny. That was absolutely incredible. I too have notes written here that I will be posting on my wall. Our first question comes from Kyla. Let me find it again. I'm sorry, we've had a number of questions come in. She says her question is regarding lessons of leadership in a large company. How do you sustain employee motivation to ensure that you are retaining talent and building culture in your company as the industry grows so rapidly?
Yeah, look, I think if you give people an opportunity to always learn and you work with something that has meaning and purpose, you will both retain them, and you'll retain them because they care about what they work on, and meaning the purpose and meaning it's something valuable, and they have a chance to learn. So my observation, having led a really big group, is transparency with them, concentrate. Another great saying I learned from someone else, actually it was Ken Chenault from American Express. He used to say to me, a leader's job is to paint reality, but give hope. Mm-hmm. And I quoted Ken, but one day I Googled it to say, now who actually, I had to be sure Ken's words, and I found it was Napoleon, actually. So I did tell Ken, you must credit Napoleon now. Okay, so it was he, but it is a wonderful saying for big groups, because when you're really moving large numbers of people, you have to repeat often, be authentic, but this point about reality and then hope, because you're asking big groups to do hard things. And so being able to give the reality of it, but then why you're doing these things. And for me at IBM, the reason people come to IBM is because we work on really hard, difficult things that do mean a lot to how the world actually runs. And that's who comes here, who cares about doing that kind of work. And then your job, my job to keep them, is I got to keep giving them an opportunity to be challenged, right? That's my responsibility. I won't guarantee you the job, I'll guarantee you employability.
I think that's great. And, it goes back again to authenticity and having a mission. And I think for young women like ourselves, it can be a little daunting sometimes. You feel like you have to say the right things and look the right way when you go into an interview. But I think keeping that authenticity in mind is great. Our next question actually comes from an anonymous attendee, but they ask, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing women newly entering the workforce out of college? And how can we address or cope with this challenge currently?
Well, that's I should ask you guys that. I mean, one of the biggest challenges that I see, and I'm very empathetic about this, is young women who have families entering the workforce, or have been in a little while and then want to have a family, as an example. We've gone to great lengths to be so flexible, whether it's shipping breast milk or whatever it can be, to keep people in the workforce in a flexible way, or to get them back into the workforce in a very flexible way. So I think, because I don't necessarily distinguish between women or young men joining the workforce. To me, the difference starts to happen over a little period of time in the number of women that seem to fall out. And that's what I spent so much work on, trying to keep them into the pipeline, right? And so recognizing that, whether it's right or wrong, not that men don't do a lot of things to help raise children or take care of a house. My husband is taking care of all those duties when I work, but it's been that issue that more women seem to have to, and particularly in this COVID time, I'm really worried about that, because when it comes to, I'm very empathetic to the people that got all these kids at home, homeschooling, right? And they're trying to do their jobs, and every person's in another room, and you're watching, what's happening, and trying to keep a 4-year-old glued to a chair, right? Is like you almost need a glue. And therefore, we've been really flexible on trying to give people, we had a pledge from home, don't worry about how you look. Don't worry about if the kid's dashing through. Don't worry about, all these kinds of things, because that's life. So I'm empathetic to when you say, what do I worry? I worry about the number of responsibilities you put yourself the pressure under to do that. And I think that's our job, to be empathetic leaders to that.
That's great, especially given the current COVID situation. Obviously,
Yeah, that's
working mothers have been inadvertently affected. So it'll be interesting, I think, to see how we cope with that
yeah,
challenge.
I'm quite worried about what it'll do to set back diversity in the workforce, right? Because if you lose a whole generation that sits out 2-3 years, right, what that means.
It's huge. Our next question comes from Emily Stein. She says, "Hi, Ginny. The work you have done to encourage skill training and changes to job requirements is incredibly inspiring. My question is how you think the public and private sectors should be working together to change how we view education and training so that it can have as broad a reach as possible. What role do you think companies like IBM have in encouraging the government to push for policies related to this?"
Yeah, no, look, I believe the answer flipped that question into a statement in that I think the only way this gets fixed is public-private partnership. So everything I described we were doing, this is us working with community colleges, with schools. As someone, I just did a New York Times interview earlier today, and he asked me about the secret of the, or secret sauce of this. And I said, you gotta have a willing principal or chancellor, whatever it is, and a governor in a state. You got to have employers who are willing to do the mentorship and offer jobs. The secret sauce is the ability to offer job. I don't care what country I'm in the world, job is a currency. And if I can offer jobs, you can be surprised how you can get the education system to change when you have something, the supply and demand get matched up then. And so that's why I think it's got to be public-private. I think, frankly, the reason I've been so focused on, someone said, oh, well, would you like to go run it, education or no, I mean, I can do more good on a private sector side because I have the jobs. And so like this coalition we're building of people hiring Black employees, that makes all the difference. If every one of us will hire 1,000 more than we would have, it will make the difference, and those schools will change because of it. So I'm a big, and now that means also policy change. And I have tirelessly worked on some policies. Trust me, they move at a different speed, but we've gotten them through. So like as a leader of a company, you can't have an opinion on everything out there in the world. And I've always said it's about policies, not politics. This is probably particularly germane today. And it's what's allowed every IBM CEO to give counsel to every head of state in the world. We don't have a political action pact. We don't donate money. It is about the policies. So I can find my way with any administration because it is about the policy. And then you pick the ones most aligned to what Brooke was asking about values. So I've taken hard positions on bathroom bills, as an example, on Dreamers, Gone to the Hill, on education. There's 120 billion spent on higher ed, the Higher Education Act. We have been really lobbying to get that thing so that you could use that money if you're not a full-time student. Let's say you're getting your certificate or you're working part-time, back to that speed of transformation because of technology. So I do think the public sector can make a really big difference. Look at COVID right now. All my buddies at J&J, Merck, Pfizer, I mean, they're all rallied. We harnessed all the high performance computing so that there's 40 big groups of scientists that are doing all of their research work on COVID on this big consortium of high performance supercomputers that we put together. So the government couldn't have done that alone. So this is why I think it's like this is a perfect moment to see. This has been the most encouraging marshaling of the private sector, what you've seen happen with COVID right now. Big day for Pfizer announcing that. And again, there's more behind them, right? So because the world won't be about one vaccine.
Right. No, and I, as a native Texan, I mean, I've seen the role that, companies like IBM can take in shaping policy, and it's so important, and abroad, even American foreign policy abroad. So I think it's a fascinating question that is only more relevant as time goes on. Our next question comes from Marie. She asked, what tips/advice would you give to women who have a hard time communicating confidently and being heard in all male environments and industries?
Oh, this is a very excellent question, actually. And I get this from my sisters, and I give them lectures on this topic. But by the way, I have noticed it. I'll say something in a meeting, and a man will say it. And I was like, God, didn't I just say the same thing? I mean, really, what did I not say so forcefully? And so I've often said that communication is a science, not an art. And once you kind of really believe that, you'll learn to communicate more straightforward. So I can remember times I would say, well, let me ask it in the form of a question, or I believe. I stop that. You say, no, state it as a fact. That's what someone else would do. And so there are ways in which you make your points. I think that many of us tend to make them at a little more appropriate times for it, but softer way. But there are also other times, instead of saying, well, have you thought about this? You say, you should do this. I mean, you'd be more affirmative about these things. And so my biggest tip is about that affirmative. And the second big tip is about, you can just practice. You can really get good at communication. And I do believe it's a really critically important skill. Get a coach, practice with someone, but whatever it is, if you're authentic, you'll be a great communicator.
That's great. And it seems like a trend among people we've talked to previously, just make yourself heard, be confident and strong in what you're saying. And I think that's great advice. Our next question comes from Akash, who asks, from your unique experience, what is something important that you learned about being a good leader that many people might not know about or overlook?
Well, I'm not sure it's new, guys, but as I've been in these kind of odd COVID times, I couldn't go out to say goodbye to all my clients. I couldn't introduce them to my successor in person, which I would have loved to do everywhere in the world. So I came up with, again, back to, since I'm such a great Zoom cocktail person now, I've been holding these kind of remote cocktail parties with CEOs around the world. And the one thing I heard back from them, which I think you should never underestimate, is your ability to listen. And it's the intent of your listening. Because some people will listen, but it's not for an intent to learn. I think one of the greatest things I've learned is the power of listening with an intent to learn. And if you do, people will share great amounts with you, and it is a way to build trust. And so that would be one of those things.
That's wonderful. I love that. And I think that, it's incorporated into mentorship as well, and role models and seeking opportunities to engage. Our last question today from the Q&A is from an anonymous attendee again, and they ask, how do you overcome failure, or how do you approach that bounce back situation?
Yeah, well, look, I think one of the greatest things, and I like to think of it this way, is resilience. All right. So, and you can build resilience, like putting a drop of, or penny in the piggy bank and build up your resilience. Well, it is one of, as you all go on to whatever you do, it is one of the greatest things to focus on building is resilience. And how do I focus on it? I feel like as long as my family's healthy, I have my health. I mean, these are the things that really, at the end of the day, everything else can be replaced. And so I keep everything in that perspective, no matter how big, and trust me, I do feel the weight of my role, which was the days I thought, my God, there's 1 million people depending on my pension. There's, I've got the world's largest pension. I keep 100% funded, by the way. And, you do have a very weighty responsibility, but resilience, I prided myself in resilience. Nothing ever stopped. It just, that's okay. Something happened, then you come up with a plan to go on to the next step. That's all. And it is really something for everybody to think about, how you build your own resilience, and you can build it. And I think it's by keeping perspective on things. And I'll end with a great quote. Ann Richards was the governor of Texas, Alex. So I will do this for you. Yes. And someone once asked her what was the secret to her success. And she said it was passion and perseverance when everyone else would have given up. And that's, to me, the definition of resilience.
That's great. I love her as well. So she's
a fireball, right? Yep.
Oh yeah. Well, that was absolutely incredible, Ginny. I think I can speak for all of us when I say I'm eager now to get out and make action and do things. It's always so wonderful to hear from people.
Great. Well, you ladies were very well prepared. And so I hope everybody listening, it was something fun. So it was a pleasure to do this for you and with you, and come work at IBM. Always a paid advertisement.
You have Ginni's sponsorship. So I just want to, of course, thank you for joining us today. And of course, thank Brooke for hosting. And again, to everybody, we will be posting today's event on the Stanford Women in Business website. So follow up there. But thank you to all of those who attended and submitted questions. We look forward to seeing you at our next event. So Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, ladies. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.